what was the year that I first interviewed you, at the Stone Circle? 10 years? 10 years ago. Okay, 2014. Yeah, there you go. So I guess without further ado, here is Simon Parkes, and you are in for a treat.
Hello, hi, ELMS. Lovely to be back. I thought it was 2 o'clock, but it's changed to 2:30, so that's fine. Thanks to Kerry, who always does this, and to Kat for making it possible. As you know, I'm not a researcher, I'm an experiencer, and it's a big difference. I'm an experiencer who has the benefit of serious people with serious intel. Not all of it very useful to me, but I'll never say no, because if you say no to serious intel, I'll never give you any more. Thank you for the hat element there. I have now 5 non-circumventing, non-disclosure agreements with certain people. I am happy to take 10 minutes of questions, and I'm sure you'll have questions on the RV. I'll do the best I can within the law to answer that truthfully. I don't ever push a particular message because somebody wants me to push it. I will not tell lies because somebody thinks that that's what the audience needs to hear. And I made that very clear 3-4 years ago, and it didn't come back to bite me. So I was respected for it. And so they don't bother trying to give me the nonsense that other commentators will give you. No names, I'm not going to do it. Right, so this is flying saucers, Nazi tech, or something else. Why am I using the word flying saucers? Because that is very derogatory. There's a reason for it. It's because of Kenneth Arnold, and it is fixed in our psyche and history. And I'm going to run through this. I've only got an hour and a half. I've got loads of presents here. I will probably be doing this conference again next year, probably, because of my association with Kerry and Kat. But from this moment onwards, the only conferences that I'll be doing will be through CC. We will run our own conferences. The first one will be in London next year. And with the RV, I've been asked officially to speak for the RV to present the projects that will be going around the world next year. So I really don't think I'm going to have any time for anything, but because of the connection I have here, I think it would be very disrespectful of me not to do your one. Shall I press this and see what happens? Because last time it all went wrong. All right, okay. Okay, so before we start, why or what makes a person believe in flying saucers? It's a person who's either seen something themselves, a person who they respect has seen something and has convinced them, or they just know. But if you're a spiritual person, an open-minded person, you've got to be a bit more than open-minded, but spiritual, you're in a better position to make a judgment. This is a modern apartment block of 15, spot the CC member. The CC member does not have a electronic meter. It's the old analog meter there. These meters have been pushed left, right, and center. So this one is a bit blurry, but this one is the CC member's analog meter. Everyone else has a smart meter. So you can tell a person who's awake and aware because they will refuse to have a smart meter. I just thought I'd show you that. All right, so the standpoints that people have on this, and it's a subject that really goes right through. Are all these craft Nazi, and I'm talking about Nazi as Third or Fourth Reich, are they all alien? Are they all the United States of America? Are they mixtures of it, some of the above? And of course the vast majority of people who say it's none of these, it doesn't exist, it's all total nonsense. So I quickly wanted to look at what happened before the Second World War, what happened during the Second World War, and just after, up to the late 50s, because after that was a very big change in the type of craft that were being observed. I'm only going to try and show you what I consider genuine photographs. If there's any there that I think are not genuine, I'll say that. This, I believe, is genuine. It's about 1898, and it's a mothership or a craft. Remember, anything pre-1985 is gold dust because there was no CGI. CGI came in to the civilian side about 1985. So literally the only way you could fake it was if you threw a hubcap wheel up in the sky and took a picture. So anything pre-1985 is gold dust as far as we're concerned. You can't even look at YouTube, it's just pointless anymore. So the very first crash was either in 1933 in Germany or 1936. It's very hard to get the truth out of that. I know Hitler only came to power at a certain point in 33, but National Socialism was quite strong during from 1929 onwards. And this was a dumped craft full of technology to push the German scientists into their headlong charge into the tech. 39, 40, 41, the Germans seemed to win every battle they came across. And then Hitler decided that he wouldn't buy oil from Bush, and it all changed. And so the whole balance was brought to a much more even scale. And the Missouri crash, Missouri in the southern states, 1941. And so the Americans now got hold of technology. So both sides now were being balanced out, although the Germans had a head start. But they made the mistake of not looking at the cold fusion reactor for a bomb. They looked on the cold fusion reactor as an ability to power the craft. That is why America had the nuclear bomb and Germany did not. Right, so I have photographs of these, but this is a contemporary drawing done in 1941 by a guy who was a news guy who got to the scene in Missouri in 1941, and that's his drawing. And there's one occupant. Now I'm going to play with this. This is fun. So Roswell. That's the head. That's the body. Well dead, I'm afraid. There is a photograph of this. The guy also did a drawing, and this creature's dead, and these two guys are, I think, FBI. Right. What's that? All right, so yeah, the Battle of LA, it's not clear. They expended thousands and thousands of anti-aircraft shells, artillery. Nothing was hit. There's the searchlights. Those blobs are not craft. They're the explosions of ground-to-air artillery. But this is 1942. Is that right?
Actually, I'm not good on numbers, so
Oh. Okay. So China, 1942. I love it because there's no CGI, and there is a person here, a Chinese person pointing, and that's a craft there. Now what's very interesting is all the craft pre-1960 look as if they've just literally come out of a human factory. And that was a very big change, the late 50s, 60s. Suddenly all these craft changed dramatically. So let's talk about the Horton Flying Wing. We're talking about, German technology. You're all familiar with this craft, or you should be. And the mainstream tried to really do a hatchet job on it by saying that it was all made of balsa wood and plywood, which it was, and saying that that was because Germany was in such a poor state, it was in a terrible state, and therefore it could only build aeroplanes of wood. The reality was that this was made largely of wood and then soaked in graphene and graphite, which absorbed radar waves. So when this aircraft took off from France, it had to be halfway over the channel before it was identified by British radar. There was no time for the fighter bases in Kent or Sussex to scramble to it, and they had to get them literally from London. So far from being a primitive piece of equipment, it was absolutely amazing because they understood how that would absorb the radar waves and give them precious time over the channel. Of course, Sea Lion never occurred. This is later, and they never had any more operations like that. Right, so Foo Fighters. What's so funny about this is that the SS did a report and said that they were convinced that Foo Fighters belonged to America. The America teams did a report and said they belonged to Germany. So we can conclude that Foo Fighters didn't belong to either America or Germany. The Brits were blamed for it. These are pictures taken from an aircraft, American aircraft. They're too small to be craft with individuals in. These are automated objects that are very interested in the war and are just following bombers in to see what's all about. That's Foo Fighters, that's the American term for it. So what crowd-funded film depicted Nazis on the moon? Well done. Iron Sky. Right, the history of that, what is coming down, is basically nobody of the big cinema groups would fund it. So with Iron Sky, what happened was that nobody wanted to do it. So these two brothers and other guys did a crowdfunding, and they crowdfunded the film Iron Sky, which was literally about Nazis in flying saucers on the moon because they were blocked. A premiere on the South Bank was organised for 5 days. The government came in and it was only allowed for 4 hours on the South Bank. However, of course, the beauty of the internet, you could just go onto a certain auction site and buy them. So it destroyed their embargo overnight, and they just let go of it. But that's the attitude. They did not want a film about Nazis with flying saucers on the moon, and of course they did a second version. So that's it, Iron Sky. This is, I believe, a genuine picture. The Fight Squad is the company that's bought the rights to all of these pictures that are fairly genuine. I have gone and bought some of these photos to give out. Where are the photos? Right, so if you look at this picture, I know it's got this thing right across it, but if you look at it, the craft is very primitively made. That does not look like something that's come from another world. It's clearly something that has been made locally. I like the picture because the 3 Germans on the side are all classically wearing 1944, 1945 greatcoats, and they are in a classical position of a German Leica camera like this, because all the cameras made in Germany are box cameras, and you did that. And the hunched position here, he's rolling the film on, I believe. So it's so unusual that these guys have got here and they're taking pictures of it. So I think that's great, and we're going to give some of those pictures out. Another one I believe to be genuine, an American aircraft fighting or chasing what is called a Foo Fighter, but we can see what that is. And this has been taken by the gun camera of another aircraft. This is not genuine. This is a CGI rendition, but I've got it here for a very important purpose, because there are 3 huge, like, I don't know, ping pong balls or blisters here, 1, 2, 3, and the original craft that landed in Germany had those. What the Germans wanted to do was arm it and put weapons on it, and when they did that, and they took all the instruments out of that, they had to then go back to a conventional form of propulsion, which is a huge propeller, blades in the bottom. The 3 blisters work by feeling the Earth's gravitational field, and inside is like a phased array which will move. That is why a genuine back-engineered or alien craft will move like that. So although I don't think that's a real picture, it's a damn good representation of what they were working on. All right, so I want you to tell me what this is, please. Oh, wow. Hold it. No, you're ahead of me. You're ahead of the slides. Who said the Nazi bell? Come on. What is it called? Come out. What's it called, though? But you're ahead of the game, because for 40 years, this is called the fly trap or Hitler's Stonehenge. You do get a prize. So basically, for 40 years, this is what people thought it was for. The saucer would land on the top. Officially, it's an uncompleted or incomplete water tower, which doesn't work because of the huge cabling, electric cabling that was provided to it. So this representation may not be correct. You really have done well here, because I can shoot on the head. That was a clue to see if anyone would get it. The elite know all about it, because they've even had a play around with some of their drawings here. Why do we know this? Because the first guys after the war to get down here found ceramic tiles. Now, the original experiments for Diaglocker Underground, just like the space shuttle was covered in ceramic tiles, ceramic is a really, really important material. Don't think it's old hat. It's very special. The whole bell was covered in ceramic tiles, and all of the chamber around was covered in cork, a huge cable, and when it was activated, it would feel the gravitational fields, and it would swing around. So they actually found ceramic tiles in the bottom, and running along the top are great huge hooks which the wire ran down. So why is it not underground? Because they're obviously clearly attempting to get this thing to shoot upwards. So whoever did this representation here knows a great deal. Right, we're moving on. Oh, where's that thing? I want to have a fun here. That's Von Braun. We'll talk about him a little bit. Right, ready, steady, go. Who's first? Come on. Right, so paperclip, well done. Anybody as old as me, do you remember in the early days with the Microsoft, you get a little assistant that would come up? I couldn't resist this one. It looks like you're writing unsubstantiated nonsense. Would you like to turn on all caps? I thought it was brilliant for Operation Paperclip. So very quickly, personal recollections. There can't be anybody alive now who literally was part of Paperclip in terms of those scientists. I don't know if privilege is the right word. I really can't call it that, but I don't have to read books on the subject. For those of you who do know me a little bit, my mother worked for Paperclip, or worked with Paperclip scientists between about 1966 and intensely between 66 and 74, when she was doing 2 top secret documents a month. Then she had a year off, and then she went back, and then they killed her in 1979. So the point about my experiences are the discussions that took place when I was still in primary school between her security agent, a guy called Paul, when she was doing all the work, and they were all coming from German scientists in West Germany. These were scientists who were not prepared to relocate to the United States, had escaped from being taken by the Russians, although the Russians did make a drive into the West and kidnapped a lot of scientists, and it caused a war. And so they had to get round this, and the only way they could get round it was by MI5 becoming the country for the scientists. So the nationality of these paperclip scientists was no longer German. It was British, managed by the MI5. And that's, for many years, the relationship that my mother had in working with these documents. So can't be many of us left who have a physical connection to Paperclip and what the heck was going on. I mean, we've only got an hour and a half, so we're going to fly through it. We've got here, you obviously spot Oberth and you spot Von Braun. Originally, because Von Braun here is in charge, but out of deference to his old boss, he's sitting at the back. Right, so this Admiral Byrd, people tend to read just about high jump, and they don't really get any further than it. Yeah, well done. Very quick. So the problem for people who don't research it is that Byrd had been to, the cold regions twice before. Literally, this wasn't his first time, and he was chosen because he was experienced with that. And that is a genuine picture of them landing, trying to put these tracks out so that vehicles can come. It looks very inhospitable and not much fun. I don't necessarily agree with this. I think all of this area here we can consider probably settled by German speakers, not just where that is. And of course that's an artistic representation of what Byrd was supposed to have come up against. What's very interesting is before this, but just after the war, we don't want to get in anyone's trouble, but you know very well that I don't believe that Hitler was dead in Berlin, and he was in a flotilla of submarines, and the Brits knew all about it, and they tried to intercept it, but they were defeated because the Germans used a revolutionary new torpedo. Never mind the sound one you've read about, which circles round. They actually had like the tactical optical wired that the Americans used as an anti-tank weapon in the Vietnam War. They had a spool and 2 wires coming from it, and then they had to be at periscope depth, and they could literally, using a toggle ball, move the torpedo, and the Brits took a pounding. And that's one of the reasons that this was put forward. Now, what Byrd found isn't officially released, but whatever it was, he knew that he couldn't go back and do that again. So there's no doubt that sightings increased from 1947. Why? Why did sightings increase from 1947? The atomic bomb, yeah, okay. Well, look, it's very difficult. The aliens that we're going to talk about in a minute, probably not from Zeta Reticula, but possibly from 38.6 light years away. It takes them about 9 months to arrive, and that's utilizing portal technology. So if you detonate a bomb or you do something, you've got 9 months for that particular group to arrive, and that's the group that we will talk about in a bit. Thank you. Kenneth Arnold. Kenneth Arnold's got a lot to answer for, along with the media, because it's affected true descriptions, because everything became a flying disc or a flying saucer, and when they weren't. Now, what's a difficult thing with Mr. Arnold is that he is associated with that. That is what he's associated with, right? However, when he was interviewed, and these are his own drawings, he drew that. And that's very interesting, because we would call that like a heel boot, and one of the Roswell independent witnesses said that this craft looked like a heel boot. So we have a problem here, because he's drawn or pushed that crescent shape, and yet his own photograph, this is his own picture, and I think it's absolutely genuine. He was a really good pilot, is that. And that is a real genuine. Now, that's not dissimilar to what came down in Roswell. It's a real photograph. Do not believe that's a fake, okay? Miles away, but that's another one. The reason I put that one on, because it's like a vril craft. It's like the very, very first craft that was being used. This is about 1948. Right, I'm not a researcher. What I do is I think about what I'm going to talk about, and then I'll go and find pictures on the internet. 5 years ago when I did this, I had no problem in finding any pictures. You cannot believe the censorship that has occurred in the last few years. When I type in Roswell, I get CIA website, FBI, the Air Force, this museum, that museum, all debunking it. Now, 5 years ago, I could go on and get, I want to talk about this. I'll get a picture of that. It took me 5 hours over 3 days to get some of the pictures, and luckily I'd kept them from the first time. And I understand that people are putting them up, but they're being taken down very quickly. So that is actually their official sign they've been putting up, that the Air Force says it's closed, we're not talking about it. If we get a change in president, I think that this will change, but at the moment, the last four plus years have been very, very unfortunate for truth. People say, well, can you prove it? They'll always say that, but how about this? I'm going to go for 8th of July, because that's when the Roswell newspaper said that the flying saucer had been caught. 2.5 weeks later, the National Security Act is brought forward. Why? America won the war in 1945. Had no need to do it, but they did. 2.5 weeks later, the National Security, all the words you hear now about national security, that comes back from this. And then on the 18th of September, the CIA was created, and the CIA's job was to clamp down and prevent any of this information going out. Then by 1952, a couple of presidents had already met some off-planet entities, and so the NSA was brought them in to communicate with them, and that's why today the NSA is a code breaker, it's into encryption, and that's their strength, and that's where they come from. Although the NSA came after the CIA is actually senior to the CIA because of the National Security Council that sits above it. Now, another attack we get is, oh, well, you know, the mayor only wants Roswell UFOs because all the shops do well. We are now going to honour Kerry by giving her a present, because one of these sweets says, glow pop, glowing where no pop has glowed before. What's a glow pop? Popsicle, 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 popsicle. That is not what you think. Hold on to it, don't lose it. No, don't lose it, Kerry. Don't lose it. I'll talk in a minute. You got ahead of it. Right, so there we go. I don't have any problem with someone making a bit of money. It looks fun to me. So let's remind ourselves that this did hit the mainstream newspapers, mostly in America. Very clever here because, you know, it says that the army discounts. Normally, no disrespect, but American humor generally is not. But that is very clever. I like the bit at the bottom that's got nothing to do with it, which says, lost purse holding diamonds is found, but the money is missing. Right, so you're very famous with that. Who can tell me who these two guys? So they're holding what they want to show, which is the Rowan target radar. It's not a weather balloon, it's a target radar balloon device. And you are familiar with the pictures, but not familiar enough to know both names. No. So here we are. They released a whole load of pictures to follow it up to convince people, and this is all staged. This is the Roaring Target mogul balloon. I've got a better picture here, which actually shows why they tried to say that that produced sort of 250 yards of debris. Well, of course it wouldn't. So that's the actual mogul balloon. Where White Sands, just outside to the east of White Sands, was where these were being launched, and then they were being tracked by 3 radars. So it was secret, there's no question about that. In order to counter all the fact of these bodies that were being found in Roswell, they talked about crash dummies, but of course the bodies were between 3'5" and 4 foot, and these were all 6 foot, and the Air Force did, after 20 years, retract this. They said it was crash dummies, it wasn't. Right, who's this? Right, you may wonder if I've gone mad. I haven't gone mad. Yeah, so that's Lee Van Cleef, right? Those of you who are not into westerns, you notice he's got a black hat on. Here we go. In a few dollars more, at the beginning of the film, where did the train make an unscheduled stop? Nobody knows. Okay. I'm going to go back with them. Right. Tucumcari. You're going to watch the film tonight. There's a reason for this, because there's a report of some material dropping into Tucumcari, okay, which is just outside of there's Roswell down here on the bottom. I don't know if you can see it. But it's a hidden piece. But we've got a bit more. Which Canadian national, famous for his British host shows in 1950 and 1960, was driving through New Mexico on the 8th and 9th? Well done, that man. Come on. Right, Huey Green. There's a reason, of course. Here he is. Well done. Huey Green was a Canadian bomber pilot in the Second World War and saw Foo Fighters and knew they were not from this earth. In 1947, got a job. He was driving across. He heard on his radio live all the stories of the crashed UFO. He followed it. It was 2 days' drive. He got to the gas station, jumped out to buy all the newspapers and found nothing, and realized that the government had clamped down on it. In 1955, the very first edition of Flying Saucer Review, which is a British periodical, it's not going now, he wrote an article in the very first one, and he's an absolute true believer, and you know they've kept that story out. As a flyer, he apparently went to see the hangar where the Roswell spacecraft was held, not the bodies, but the craft. So he has talked about that. So I think there's a lot more that he could have said but didn't. How many retrieved craft at Roswell do we think? 2. No present. 3. Where's 3? Where's 3? Right, why 3? Bless you. Right, here we go. Right, so you are familiar with this picture. Here is General Roger Ramey. That's General Roger Ramey. He actually said 10 years after the event that it was the biggest lie of his life to another officer, a captain, the biggest lie of my life. When people put their hands to their face like that, that's usually a sign that they're a little bit nervous. But who would have thought, all those years later, there would be the software program to read the telegram in his hand. Now, 5 years ago, I found 7 sites with this on and the translation. Now, you cannot find them, and there is a company offering between $10,000 and $30,000 for anybody who can provide a software program that will read this letter. So if you were to write in and say, well, I've got something, you'll disappear. So don't write in. And the civilian side had the technology in 1990 to do this. And for those of you who're not familiar with it, I'm going to read it because it's really great. So the Forward Army Air Force, remember the American Air Force, the United States Air Force, was not separate from the Army in 1947. It didn't become separate until later. So it acknowledges a disc is the next new find west of the cordon. I think it's the 258 road, the highway that runs up north from Roswell. They put military trucks about 12 miles along that. Everything west of that was the cordon. So it says that as the new find west of the cordon, at the location was a wreck, and it could be the word pod. Could be pod. They couldn't be clear whether it's wreck or pod. Near the operation at the ranch, that's Mac Brazil's ranch, and the victims of the wreck you forwarded to the team at Fort Worth. So a victim is a dead one, isn't it? Then it says aviators in the disc, they will ship for, and then it gives the point. So there's live ones. So it's actually saying that the dead ones are going one way and those that are alive are going somewhere else. And then it talks about B-25 or C-47, whichever can do it. The airfoil is going to be assessed at Roswell. The counterintelligence team, the CIC team, which ran all this, said that the misstate was when Roger Ramey authorized we found a flying saucer, that the misstate could be used, and it would work really well with the weather balloons if photographs were used with the crews, and I showed you some of the photographs. So this is absolute evidence, and because it's absolute evidence, you find it very, very hard. I got this. I have got a copy. I found it on a newspaper. In 2022, there was a big UFO thing in Britain, and one of the papers redid this, and whoever's in charge hasn't found that and scrubbed it yet. So I'm going to quickly look at this. It's not a good picture, but just bear with me, because I've got this wonderful pointer. This is the cliff, which I believe was the impact of the most intact craft. These are roads. There's a road there. But this is the walkway where hundreds or thousands of people have paid homage, isn't the right word, but have come to visit it. And as such, what they've done is they've caused a wide path, and that is a reason that they're knowledgeable, because that, we believe, the craft hit here and skidded all along here. The information I was given was that it was about between 250 and 500 yards long, but only to a depth of 8 inches. Now, what the intelligence community believe is that just before this craft impacted, partial power came back onto the craft, so its mass went to 0. So in effect, although it would be like, someone said to me, a bulldozer being dropped from 30,000 feet, the shields or the feels of the craft was such that it only dug in about 8 inches into the ground. So the boffins and the American military said power must have come back on just before it hit. If it had come back on earlier than that, the craft wouldn't have crashed. So let's have a look at some of it now. These 2 pillars have been erected because the craft was supposed to come through the middle here. That's the path I showed you. And behind is the canyon. I believe it's called an aurora. How do you pronounce it in America? Aurora, okay. Here, I believe, is where it crashed, into that spot there. From what I've been told, not from what I've read. This is a picture someone has taken standing just underneath where the craft was supposed to crash, looking down. The path would be sort of coming up this way here. Can't do this now, really, because this does belong to somebody. And last I heard, they weren't allowing any trips. This is Tester's model. It's probably the most authentic. How are we doing for time? Probably the most authentic looking representation of the actual craft that crashed. Remember the one I showed you that Kenneth Arnold had? This is very, very similar. Halfway through. Thank you. And then another representation. These are not Zeta Reticula, and you know, many of you are very familiar with this, and I hope you hear some new things today. You may not agree with it, but here we go. This cabin was filled of fluid. In the bottom on the floor were small things like anemones which filtered the impurities because these creatures excrete through their skin. This is a sensor array, and the angle of the crystals meant that the craft had to fly upside down. That's where we get ground-hugging radar from. So this was a tank full of sterile, nutritious fluid. Remember, these creatures are not, they don't have an elementary canal, they don't operate like we do. And so when the damage occurred, it evaporated, and because it was in the desert, it evaporated very quickly. None of the witnesses actually said it was wet, but that is believed to be the way it was. The boss, she sits at the back there, just like the Matrix. Her head plugs in to a device so that she is in communication with the craft, and she controls it, although the other operators, up to 7 of them in this craft, take on other responsibilities. All this was worked out in the 1960s and 70s, but not shared with the public. So that's the picture again. Let's just see what the Americans have been doing. This is a conventional powered craft. It's too like it. This is made up one. Who knows what that is? Right, so Irwin Allen's Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea was a film in 1961, and a TV series between, I think, 66 and 68. And it is so like the craft that these people have all got to be sitting down having a coffee after the Pentagon closes and all having a general chit-chat about what they want to talk about. It's not exactly the same, but it's the same point that doesn't have a tail. I know the Germans were working on Taylor's craft, but they came from the same aspect. That's a real drone, not the drones that you're shown by the BBC in the wars taking place. This is a Sentinel drone. It's the cutting edge, and it's absolutely superbly advanced drone. Famous with this one, 1990. This is, I think, a human back-engineered craft. It's triangle. You all have seen these pictures. That's a genuine picture. That's why we're using it. Second recovery, I believe, was a pod. It was the escape element. And the third recovery, well, I believe there was a third craft that crashed. I think the first 2 craft crashed were the ones you're familiar with. I think the third one was a completely different race and was a traditional round or slightly elliptical disc. Witnesses have drawn 2 very separate drawings. The mortician drew from memory a face which is unlike the face that you're familiar with now. Roswell debris field. Can you describe what was collected, anybody? Bits of foil, well, all right. Bits of metal, come on then. That's as good as we're going to get. All right, this is a genuine replica of one of the spar bars as remembered by Jesse Marcel's son, who drew it out, and thank God for American capitalism, because had it not been for that, nobody would have thought they could make any money. So basically, that is a really good replica. You won yourself that. It's really great. There you are. Have that. So well done. Thank you. Debris field. Let's talk about something else. A meteorite crashed in Germany 15 million years ago. Crashed in Germany, spread its material, which is a mixture of earth and alien, into Czechoslovakia, made some beautiful minerals. What do we call them? So moldavites, very interesting. I was told when I first went live with this, don't ever get yourself any moldavite, it will disappear. I bought myself one. I lost it. I bought a second piece. I lost it. I bought a third piece. I lost it. And then I was told, no, someone has to give it to you. They won't take it if it's a gift, because it enhances your connections with extraterrestrials. That's the element that goes with it. Because when this meteorite hit the ground, it mixed Earth material with alien material, and it's super hot into glass. There you go, that's it. So the debris field, I like the debris field drawing here simply because we've got Mac Brazil with a cowboy hat. He's got a white hat on. Carries on a roll here. And we've got the Jeep, and you've got Marcel here in the same pose, but more importantly, you've got the debris field going from left to right. You've got the sheep that refuse to cross the debris field, and you've got a wind vane showing you that the prevailing wind was that way inclined, and that's why you've got that. So whoever did this knew what they were doing. Tin foil. We say aluminium. Kerry, you say? Aluminum. You sure you want me to come back next year? So with aluminium, when we scrunch it up, it stays scrunched up. But that is not what's being reported. Also, these eye bars were found and has just been successfully won there. I'm very pleased about that. Can we list some of the back engineered items from Roswell crashes? Velcro is brilliant. I really, really like that. I'll talk to you why. So we got memory metal, laser, full transistor. The full transistor, the Germans were on the cusp of making a transistor, but it was only partial transistor. The circuit board, the integrated circuit, fiber optics, Velcro, question mark. We have to legal reasons. Advanced night vision. The Germans already had night vision, but they didn't have advanced night vision. Nanotech. We didn't get that one. Cold fusion. That's the implosion type of nuclear reactor rather than the explosion. Concept of ground-hugging radar, which I mentioned, and stealth. Now then. No, it wasn't healthy enough. Back in those days, people were really concerned about their health. Right, so those of you who have got that, just hang on to your mind. Who said laser? There was one guy that said, oh, it's two of you. I'm going to give this to you. It says 1983. I could have given you a laser pointer, but why would I do that when I was able to get this? That's yours. But you said laser, so I'll get something for you as well. All right, so in 1948, are we ready now? How hot is that? Good. In 1948, the search began for self-healing metal. That's what the American Air Force wanted, self-healing metal. Metal that if you got a bullet through it, it would actually close up. No one tells you that's why they were after it. They call it self-healing metal. And they put the German paperclip scientist, that's why it's back on here today for us, to do it. Because anybody tell me, right, so American and British, nitinol or nitinol, the civilian side, we don't have the full stuff. I'm going to give you a demonstration. The real reason for this was that the alien spacecraft didn't have flaps, so the metal would change and morph. That's how this craft can actually break into two, because this metal actually can reform and change. And so what we've got is nitinol. Those of you who got something right, as a nice joke, this is all nitinol, they're paper clips. So Operation Paperclip, you can drop this in hot water and it will go straight. Those of you who said that, will you please come up and help yourself to this? It's one each. Yeah, come on. Velcro. We're going to have this one is interesting. We've got to be very careful here legally. This guy, he has the patent for Velcro. Now, if you actually look on any site for any product, it will say this was invented and this date, and this is the patent for it. So we're very suspicious when a shaggy dog story gets told to us. Here's the shaggy dog story. 1941, this guy was walking in Switzerland with his shaggy dog, and a burr got caught to his leg, the dog's leg. 10 years later, he decided to have a think about that. A further 5 years later, suddenly he invented Velcro. What we want to say to you is that the alien that were pulled out of the craft, their suits fitted in a Velcro style to the seats they were in. And NASA today has Velcro on all of the astronauts' suits, so when they're in their chairs, they're held in position. However, he is a legally recognized guy, so we're going to give it to him because we want to stay within the law when we do public things. And he invented Velcro. Laser, we've already awarded. That was another person, but we'll give you something else for that. That was laser. Does anybody know how that laser beam was found in the craft? Anybody know? Okay, cattle mutilations. The beings had devices not unlike that, and they were using it to, cut out organs of the cattle, etc. And those devices fell into the hands of the American military, and that's where we get that. Dr. No, James Bond, 007, 1962. The American military leaked that because when they did the laser beam one, there was no such thing publicly, but they leaked that to them. Full transistor, as opposed to the Germans' transistor. The American military got told off for this because they learned that you cannot go to a private company, a multinational, and give it something that it has no track record in working on. So literally within 3 months of the Roswell crash, Mr. Shockley, Dr. Shockley, produced the Shockley diode. Bell Labs suddenly produced a transistor 3 months after the Roswell crash. And you are very familiar with this sort of transistor that you will see in your radios. Can anybody tell me what did the transistor replace? Valve. So someone said valve, really good. So 1930s valve. That's a 1930s valve. That there is a regular transistor you're familiar with. However, this is a piece of military tech. It is 15 years old, so there's no issue with it. But the transistors on there are smaller than a pinhead. So just to give you an idea, that's yours. Come and collect it when you can. The valves played a huge role in the war, First War and Second War. Why didn't humankind create something other than valves? They went through a war, such a generation of technology in the wars, more to do with the second than the first, but they went right through 2 wars and they still had the valve. It needed something to be dropped on this earth to do it. That's why all the old radios are that big, because valves create so much heat. And those radios had to be big. Those of you who are familiar with war films and the American GIs are on the radio, they're like backpacks. It's because the valves generate huge heat. Circuit board. This is a very modest 4-valve radio dated 1932. That is actually what it would look like, but more interesting. I managed to get side on. And what you've got here is a mass of cables all just soldered from one end to another, and that's how it was. Then by the time Roswell began to feed through, we begin to be familiar from about 1964 onwards with this, which is a sort of a board, but there are still wires. There's a red, yellow, green, blue going across it. Only later, when the military really gave to the civilian side, did we get this, and that's evolved from that. Now, these were embossed or stamped on the cold fusion casing reactor. The reactor was about 3 foot in diameter in the spacecraft, and these boards they weren't square, they were morphed into the actual cold fusion device. You're all familiar with the integrated circuit, and this is quite good because it actually is a bit of a breakdown. That's what you see with all the pin connectors. That's the top bit taken off. That's it enlarged, and there are 3 layers, the silicon and the different layers. What the alien group had was much larger wafers, but nanotech. So all of these connections were nanotech, and that was the difference. That's why they could process so much. You've said fiber optics, well done. Why fiber optics? Why was there not a single copper wire in that spacecraft? Because it runs at the speed of light. Right. Yeah. You approach 180,000 miles a second, and you press a button to tell the spacecraft to stop. That message will never reach the computer. Because the craft is going at 180,000 miles a second, your message is never going to get to the computer. So they had to encode everything in light. But it's still isn't fast enough to get here in 9 months. So that craft, that alien group or the people behind them utilized portal technology, interdimensional, extra-dimensional, to get here in 9 months. But that is the reason, because if you are traveling near the speed of light, your communications electronically within your craft will never reach the computer. And that's where we get fiber optics from. Again, Bell Labs, 1968, the very first telephonic company in the world to network 6 of their systems together, and then the damn thing became AI active and conscious. That's why things like Terminator are so important. So in 1968, Bell Labs realized that if you're going to have AI networked at the speed of light, you'd better have each one stand alone. Now, those of you who may remember, 20 years ago, there was some experiment in Britain to do with astrology, and they said, can we access your computers when you go to bed? Anyone here remember that? But they basically said, we need computing power. We don't have the computing power, so when you go to bed, give us the permission, we'll give the codes and we'll do it. And the reason for that was all of these PCs all over the United Kingdom were not networked. So they couldn't become self-aware, and that's the reason that they did that. You know about stealth, we talked about stealth. That is a real genuine picture. I won't ask any questions on that, it's very, very famous. The question is, are they German or are they someone else? That's the White House, 1952. Probably German, because there was a move afoot to drop a nuclear bomb over both poles. Right, Stanley Kubrick. I'm not going to talk about 2001. What other film did he make that was groundbreaking from the American military's point of view? You've already got a present, but you've won another one. Is there anybody here who is very fluent in German, reads German really well? This is a book on Haunebu spacecraft. It's in German. You're going to love it. Pleasure. What happened was that he wrote to the Pentagon and said, listen, I'm going to do a film about the nuclear bomb. Could you give me access to your nuclear bombers so that I can recreate one? And they said, you must be joking, or words to that effect. Absolutely no. So he went and created this. That isn't Kubrick, but you can see that it absolutely shocked the American military because it was so spot on. They knew there'd been a leak. He also did this, which frightened them. Strategic Air Command, SAC, the meeting room, the continental United States and Europe. And they wanted to know how he got that. And so they brought him on board. Who can forget Peter Sellers playing the Nazi paperclip scientist? For those of you who haven't seen it, he keeps calling the president Mein Führer. So basically, a joke is being had here. How much, and it was in 1967 when Patrick McGowan in Ice Station Zebra once said to, I think was it Rod Steiger, or who was the captain of the submarine, he said, right, our German scientists made this, and your German scientists made that. You know, now we look back, we don't get it, but back in the late 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, German science was the cutting edge. And that is a great parody, and if you haven't seen that, please look at that. You'll actually think it's great. So why put Stanley Kubrick with Von Braun? Any ideas why these two? Right, what happened was that when Von Braun, who apparently was a dedicated Nazi, it said on his file, is a dedicated Nazi, and then they scrubbed it out and said, is not a dedicated Nazi, so that he could come across. He said that when he worked for Hitler, he could have anything he wanted. But when he was moved into these wooden mission huts, at night the desert's cold, and he asked for carpet. So the guy came and he measured up all of the wood for the carpet, and the requisition went in and it came back, that's far too expensive, and he got lino. Why would supposedly a man so important actually only get lino and not carpet, because he was the head of an operation to draw trillions of dollars out of American taxpayers for space projects that the public had no idea about. So when you put him with Stanley Kubrick, who was making fantastic models of the moon and landing here, you had a winning combination. And then you get a president to say, we're going to be in the moon in 10 years' time or what have you. So he really wasn't that important, frankly. What was important were the scientists who were working on back-engineered technology. He was taken to the Roswell crash. Principally, he was asked, do any of your German contacts have anything like this? And he said no. Einstein was taken to the crash once it had been, the Roswell craft was in. He was only interested in the power plant, and both von Braun and Einstein said this is not from this earth. We're doing well. Okay. Yes, thank you, got that right. I've been trying to get his name right. But the question is not that. The question is, who's the character behind him? Valiant Thor. Ah, of course it was, yes. Right, this man, Adamski, takes a lot of hits. And I was chatting on a three-way table with Alex. And Alex said that there had been 16 attempts to kill him. Now, I knew there'd been attempts. I didn't know there was that many. But I did know that the CIA bought the house opposite him when he was in Switzerland and just filmed 24/7. So he can't be a charlatan if the CIA put in resources to film him, and I know that for 100% fact, or there are attempts to kill him. So there's been a huge attempt to, destroy him. These are his photographs. When you look at that, he calls them the Venetian beam ships, I believe. When you look at that, that's Nazi tech. That is a honeypot. Well done. So we're beginning now to get a picture of what's happening here. That's a fantastic picture. Look at the 3 blisters underneath. There's no guns coming out of them, but this is much more genuine. Much more genuine. And that is a wonderful craft. So we can begin to see that the craft that were crashing all over the planet, but the Americans were the ones to grab them, were a very primitive. And the reason this is primitive, this group is an offshoot from the Pleiades. They went separate and they were put under an embargo of technology. And we're talking thousands of years. So basically they weren't able to update their technology because they were embargoed. And you can see there the Pleiades and the other areas that were associated with that. And that's where they've come from. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So here we got the book. Just said that there's a number of books written with this traditional type of shape on it. Okay, that's really this is the flying saucers are real, but it's the 3 blisters underneath which are the giveaway. Again, I'm going back to that. Here they've got guns on them. I don't believe that's real at all. When Hitler was banging on about the wonder weapons, he didn't mean the V1 and the V2. He meant these, but they couldn't weaponize them. If you're running a craft with magnetic field, you cannot fire a steel shot out of a traditional cannon. It will disrupt the magnetic fields. He couldn't weaponize these craft. That's why they had to be hidden. He couldn't do anything with it. This is a lovely picture. This is about 1962 over the Lake District. That is beautiful. You can see the 3 hops there. Again, it's pre-CGI. We love it. And there's a hole in the photograph which just gives it credibility. And this is 1965 over Britain as well. And this is the last pictures we have of these type of craft. As we go into the late 60s, we no longer see these craft. They're completely different. So we don't know. Is that a new race? Have they got technology and they've gone on with? Have the white hats above and below put an embargo on? But there is a huge change in what we see. It could well be that humanity now has the ability to defend itself in a relatively equal way, and others are backing off. I will go with that one. Right, experiencer group, very quickly, how much time have I got? So when I first went public, which was 2010, I decided I would, being a Brit, just about, I would contact the British UFO Research Association. I'm not here to be rude about them, I'm just here to tell the truth. And I said, look, you know, these are my experiences, are you interested? And I did get a phone call back. I always thought researchers had to be open-minded, and not, you know, take a position. And this lady who covered the northeast of England said to me, well, I think they're all angels. So what was the point in meeting her? She'd already made her mind up. She wasn't an independent person. They were all angels. So then I said, okay, well, what about in America? And I was told, no, you can't do that because that's just for the Americas. Well, I thought I'll still give it a go. So I wrote to, they're all sort of franchises, to the New York office. It's a 5-hour difference between here and the East Coast. And I said, look, you know, bit of history. The next day, I got a very polite but very American message back saying, we're not interested in coloured lights in the sky. So I said, would you be interested in the guys that fly these craft? And I did 3 of my drawings, which I hope some of you remember. I did 3 of my drawings, scanned them, sent them. Within 3 minutes, 3 minutes, I got an email back saying, welcome to MUFON. We're delighted to have you. And one of the directors will be in touch with you tomorrow. So right the next day, no Skype, it was just email. The director said, that's fantastic, really lovely to have you on board. You will have access to our support chat, and that'll be great. And I said, well, when will that happen? He said, oh, it's already done. Now, when we today go on a forum, we put a code word in, we go onto a site, and then, you know, I can't, because of my dyslexia, I can't read these things fast enough, but you know, Fred writes, then Julie writes, and so on. This came onto my email. No site, it just literally came on because it was created by the CIA. And I was later told that the CIA only wanted genuine experiences because they would just sit and monitor the chat because they wanted to learn. So it didn't actually come on a site, it was my own email page. So if I wanted to get an email from someone, I can't and it was just like that all the time. So the history is I did 3 months there and they were hugely polite to me. I have no problem with them at all. They were really supportive. They couldn't have been more helpful. And then after 3 months I said, you know, I don't really want to be here anymore. You can't do much for me. But that's great. So that was great. And many years later, I decided that it was time that I did On Connecting Consciousness and Xperia Group. So we had to have a long think about it. It had to be secure, it had to be private, and it had to be well moderated. And Carol's telling me to say, please don't join immediately because it's not ready, we're still 2 weeks or so with it. But basically, having experienced the worst of Bufora and the best of MUFON, I think what can do is have our own experiencer group, and if someone's got MK Ultra or similar, they will not be part of this bigger group. They will be a separate group, differently supported, and I will be a moderator on there and I will work with that. So what I want to do, thank you, what I want to do is to support people who perhaps have joined a group that isn't quite what it purports to be. And, you know, with me, a guaranteed anonymity, because I've experienced stuff, and so I will not be judgmental. I mean, there will be people who want to pretend, there'll be people who genuinely have mental issues, but there'll be an awful lot of people who are real and haven't been able to tell people because they will literally be pushed out. So I'm going to offer them a chance to be in an environment that is supportive and helpful. Right, so look, I'm going to take any questions on any topic, any subject. If I can't answer it, I'll tell you. This guy first and then that guy. Okay. Hi.
Why do you think stands Superman changed his mind on Majestic 12 and parts of Roswell before he died.
Right. As far as I'm concerned, the documents have a lot of truth to them. But what he did, he was a researcher, and when he wanted to find the paper trail back, he couldn't find the paper trail back. So he was unhappy. But a true researcher who isn't an experiencer wants a physical proof. And also, if you set yourself up as a researcher, you have to be able to feel that you can, to the mainstream, present yourself. There's nothing worse than an experiencer who pretends to be a researcher. It doesn't work. But what happened was that the CIA actually got to him. He'd become so influential, and if you notice, towards the last years of his life, the whole system was turned against him. Also, he'd fallen out with a number of his co-authors, and they'd all gone their own separate way. So what happened is somebody, won't say who it was, came in and did money deals with other guys, like a TV series or another book, and it split them all up. That's what happened. So I think he was a very genuine man. I think he was caught in a catch-22 position. He had nowhere to go, and I'm really sorry that he wasn't like now, because in the next few months or years he'd actually be exonerated. Yeah.
Although I do have to say something
Yeah.
about that. So I was present at a conference that he gave, and he was speaking, and I asked him about Dulce, and he denied the reality of Dulce. So he did lie on occasion.
Yeah.
He was a physicist, and he was not always honest with people.
Well, I suppose if you've got guys with sniping rifles looking at you, then you will deny that your grandmother is dead. Right, next question. I don't really listen to him very much. I don't. No, I tend to be somebody from the Pentagon will give me a message, and they wouldn't really be talking about that sort of thing. They'd be talking about things that are more practically minded, and I don't generally comment on other people. Space Force isn't quite the right name. We don't call it that. It's not called that. It's not quite like that. But no, I don't really follow that. Are you sneaking out with that present already? That's all right. He's got his present and he's off. Look. Right. Okay. Any more questions on anything? Hi.
Hi. Is there any way we can find out more about your mum?
Wait.
Her life?
My mother. Well, here's something interesting. I wasn't born in Britain. I am answering your question. I was born in Rhodesia, which is now, of course, Zimbabwe. And when I wanted to get married, they said, you can't do that because you're not British. I was like, hang on, I've been here since 1959. No, you're not British. So I had to go through a whole bloody process to be naturalised as a British subject. Now, what's really interesting is that the civil service, there was a civil servant officer attached to me, was really good, a really nice woman. And she said, look, can you give us a hand here? Tell us the schools you went to, the name of your head teacher, etc. She said, a whole lot, then we can put it all together. Now, you'll back me up on this. She came back to me and said, you don't exist. She said, if I put your name into the computer, all that comes up is the present address you're living at. As far as I'm concerned, you came into the country yesterday. Now, they did the same to my grandfather. My grandfather was not given a pension because they didn't want any connection between him and the British government. So he was given stocks and shares in Rolls-Royce engines. And that was his pension. So they gave him a huge amount of money locked up in Rolls-Royce. Okay. So you'll find the same problem with my mother. My daughter worked for the civilian arm of the British Army for a period of time. And she obtained information about my grandfather, which is not in the public domain. She got me photographs of my grandfather when he was a British diplomat and what he was doing. When he was an MI6 officer, he wasn't a field man. He was the guy who would sit behind the desk and work with the CIA and MI6. And my mother, of course, worked for MI5, but she was really working for the National Security Agency. Again, she wasn't a field officer. With that, you will not find anything about her, because anything available will be totally expunged. Even my daughter was able, through the military, to get newspaper cuttings of my grandfather marrying my grandmother in the northwest of England, and some of the details of his job, which I keep as a treasured possession, but you won't find it. So basically, when you work for an intelligence agency, you do not leave until they tell you. So my grandfather was 65 years old in 1960, and he left the civil service. He was no longer a diplomat, but he still worked for the CIA for another 5 years. Remember, in America, you don't retire at 65. You can go on. And you have to wait till they tell you, we're dispensing with your services. Thank you very much indeed. Well, my mother... she wasn't able to do that. She felt that she couldn't do the job anymore. She asked to be released. And this is the true story. My mother had very bad asthma. She had really bad asthma. And one day she came home and she said to me, I've met a man, she didn't even know who it was, who said, take this herbal medicine and it will cure your asthma. He's dead 2 weeks later. So we know where that's come from. And then literally 1979, £2,000 were a lot of money. I got an envelope with £2,000 pushed through the letterbox. And that was what we call blood money. That's about £10,000 now. So it was enough for me to leave Brighton, where I lived, and move to London and get a job. And that's not my car, is it? Good. So that's it. You won't find anything about it, but amazing woman, because of her photographic memory and her ability to spell words. So when she was doing some of these formulas, so there was like metallurgy, some of the back-engineered craft, but everything was semiconductors. It was all about computers from the late 60s onwards. And it was a hell of a difficult time for anybody who doesn't have anyone else. That's why they chose her. There was no dad in the picture. She didn't had a mum and dad, but they were separate, and they wanted people who were separate from society, and they could be easily controlled. Very hard for her, because she was fiercely loyal to this country, just as her father was, my grandfather, absolutely loyal. And before I go on to the next question, I don't know now, but in the old days, so she'd be walking through Preston Park to her office, which was GF Redfern and Co. And there would be a guy walking through the park, it's blazing hot sunshine, and he'd open an umbrella and a small piece of paper would flatter out of it. And then Winnie the Pooh, tut, 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 it looks like rain. That was the code word. She'd say something else, and that snip of paper, she would have to memorize it and then eat it. So that was how it was done. An amazing life for me to come up. And the only time I was ever excluded, and I did say this, Kerry, once when I was being interviewed, the only time I was excluded is when she signed the Official Secrets Act. And because it was old Victorian house with a big keyhole, I looked through the keyhole and I watched. But every other time, whatever the discussions, I was not removed. And I understand now, of course, with the alien interaction, what the hell was going on. And Saturday to Sunday, she'd work at home, and she'd go and have a lunch in the back and leave everything out for me to read, which I did for years and years, and that was all part of the plan. Her handler, maybe that's not the right word, was an ex-RAF fighter pilot named Paul. That was not his real name. And he used to play with me, chase the UFO. So I'd be about 6 years old, so he'd lay all the furniture out, and then he'd be the pilot, and I'd be the missile man behind him. And he would play hunt the UFO with me. And my mother would come in with cups of coffee for him, but he wouldn't be embarrassed and stand up. He would finish until we shot down the UFO or it escaped. So when I look back on it now, I realized the type of molding that was going on in my life. Next question. Someone else had a hand up and then got bored. Go on.
You mentioned, I think, that you're going to touch on the RV. Is that correct?
If you have a question.
Well, what have you heard? Anything that you can report on?
What have I heard? I want specific questions. I am not Mr. Wolverine, Mark Z, Or Bruce? Specific question. The guy at the back. Go on.
So Britain is turning into North Korea under Keir Starmer. Where do you think that's going? How can we get rid of him?
Well, that's funny because a lot of people voted for him, apparently. The reason that the Tories' only role was to destroy the connection between government and the people. That was their one role. They did that, did it really well. They were under orders to do that. This administration will do the same. It's under orders to do that, although do watch the Foreign Secretary. He's very much liked. He's a black guy, David Lammy. He's very much liked by the Trump team. And they can do business with him. But everyone else is persona non grata, and you will see as things roll out, there'll be a certain man from Essex with his 5 or 6 MPs who will come to big fame and fortune. But we can't say any more on that. Next question.
Will Aero High-Tech survive a direct CME along the size of the Carrington event?
I didn't understand that.
You know the Carrington event?
Yeah.
Will Aero High-Tech survive?
Yes, because for the last 9 years they've been proofing it, even down to civilian infrastructure. They've literally been proofing it. So a lot of the talk about an EMP or something like that would have caused tremendous havoc 15, 20 years ago. But they've done a great deal to proof that. Certainly the military won't be bothered at all. Civilian infrastructure will take a hit, but it won't be anything that was reported. So no, I've even seen some of the contractors. Look, I can't give where we live away, but I can tell you that where we live, the White Hats have a contract with Cadence, which is a gas company, to dig up the road and put in pipes ready for hydrogen. All over the country, pipes are going in that will run, we will cook on hydrogen. Now, on the motor, which is the motorway we come down on? With a Tesla. Right, so on the M5, there's a Tesla power plant. Literally look for it. It's the look for the pylons. You know what pylons of electricity look like. You look out and you'll see the most space-age pylons. This is all going on, has been for 5 or 6 years, and it's all been done quietly. But yeah, so hydrogen, Tesla technology is all being rolled out in Britain. Next question.
Release of med beds, big pharma, timelines.
I haven't. I'm running out of time unless we get 5 minutes more, but I'll take that. You ask a really, really emotional question. It's an emotional question. There really are med beds. There really, truthfully are. Now, the Chevron laws changed so that it will not be possible to successfully sue alternative medicine. And that's why the Supreme Court hid that in with its working. However, Big Pharma is still very powerful. And I'm sorry if any commentators tell you that, you know, lots and lots and lots of med beds will be rolled out and you can go and make an appointment. That's not going to happen yet. There's no way that the situation is right for that. So there are med beds, they are real, but they are not available for the general public at this time. And that's not because I decide that. That's because the situation in the world ain't right for it.
But you can etherically take yourself to work.
I haven't tried that.
I have.
Okay. Great. I need to say, are we finished now?
Yes. Well,
Technically, we've finished, and Kat's just put her head around the corner and said, that's the end of it. I hope you've enjoyed it. Come up and grab your presents. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.